My brother changed the locks on our childhood home while I was out at a job interview and left my bag sitting in the garage like I was a stranger. What made it worse, so much worse, was that my dad had seen it coming. He'd prepared for it, and he never said a word to me, not once. My dad passed after a long illness, and the first thing that hit me after the funeral was how quickly the rest of the world just went back to normal. People laughed at things. Traffic moved. The sun came up every morning, and I couldn't understand any of it. I was still staying in the house, our childhood home, the one he'd lived in for decades, and one morning I found myself just standing in the kitchen, staring at this old mug he had. Dad had a whole thing about that mug. He genuinely believed it was the only cup in existence that made coffee taste the way coffee was supposed to taste. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. I just stood there holding it, turning it over in my hands like maybe if I held on tight enough, something would stay. That's when my older brother Marcus came downstairs, already dressed, keys already in hand, that efficient, closed-off look on his face that he'd been wearing like armor since the day Dad died. He glanced around the kitchen like he was doing a quick inventory and said, "You're up early," like we were roommates, like we weren't two sons standing in the quiet wreckage of losing our father. I told him I couldn't sleep, and he nodded and said, "Dad wouldn't want us stuck." And then he was out the door. I want to be honest with you, though. I know I should have seen what was coming earlier. The signs were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to look at them. The will reading was held a few days later in a small conference room that smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. The lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, was one of those careful, deliberate men who spoke like every word had been weighed and measured before it left his mouth. Marcus sat with his back perfectly straight, hands folded on the table, eyes forward. I sat beside him with my foot bouncing uncontrollably under my chair. Mr. Caldwell went through the formalities, dates, names, legal language that somehow reduces an entire human life down to a few paragraphs. And then he got to the part I'd been dreading. The property at 14 Victory Estate, including the primary residence and surrounding land, is bequeathed to the eldest son, Marcus. Marcus didn't smile, but I saw the flicker, this tiny, almost imperceptible flash of satisfaction that passed behind his eyes, and I just stared at the table. Honestly, I wasn't even that surprised. Marcus had always been the golden one, the scholarships, the steady career, the sensible decisions, never a missed deadline in his life. He'd been the responsible one since he was 15 years old and started mowing lawns for extra cash. I was the one Dad used to call his question mark. Not because he didn't love me, he did, but because I'd never quite fit the shape that people expected. I left jobs. I tried things that didn't pan out. I failed loudly and publicly more than once. And when my last relationship fell apart and I couldn't afford rent on my own, I came home. I'll be the first to admit I probably leaned on Dad too much. I was 30, living in my childhood bedroom, and I wasn't exactly rushing to find a new career path while he was sick. I think that's why Marcus looked at me with so much disgust. To him, I was a parasite. To Dad, I was just home. But I can't lie and say Marcus didn't have a reason to be frustrated with me. Dad didn't make me feel small about it. He just said, "This house has rooms for you, so do I." So Marcus getting the property, I'd prepared myself for that. But then Mr. Caldwell said, "There is an additional note," and he slid a sealed envelope across the table. Marcus's hand immediately moved toward it, and Mr. Caldwell raised one calm, unhurried finger. "This is addressed to Vincent. Your father said you'll know when to open it." My hands were shaking when I picked it up. I recognized Dad's handwriting on the front, that wide, uneven sprawl I'd known my whole life, and I knew immediately that this room, with Marcus watching me from 2 feet away, was not the right place to open it. I tucked it into my wallet and said nothing. For the first 2 weeks after the reading, Marcus was almost like the brother I remembered growing up, stern maybe, but not cruel. He made coffee in the mornings without being asked. He'd check whether I'd eaten. He didn't say a single word about Dad's mug sitting on the counter. I started to let myself breathe a little. I should have known better. It started one Saturday morning when Marcus walked into the living room carrying a clipboard and a tape measure, with that particular look in his eyes that made the whole house feel suddenly smaller. "I've been thinking," he said, planting himself in front of the fireplace. "We should renovate." I told him the house worked fine. I told him it was Dad's house, and he looked at me with this perfectly flat expression and said, "It's my house now." Casual, like he was commenting on the weather outside. Contractors started showing up after that, stomping mud across the floors, and Marcus never once told them to take their boots off. He'd stand in different rooms pointing at walls like he was planning a demolition. I walked into the kitchen that Tuesday and found Dad's mug, the one he'd used for 30 years, sitting in the trash can. It wasn't even broken. Marcus had just cleared the counter to make room for his modern espresso machine. When I pulled it out and asked him what he was doing, he didn't even look up from his laptop. He just said, "It's a chipped piece of junk, Vincent. Get over it." I realized then that he wasn't just renovating a building. He was trying to throw Dad away. Then one evening, I was eating dinner alone at the kitchen table when he came up behind me and said he was considering selling. I put my fork down, selling it. It's a lot of upkeep. I could get something newer closer to work, or just rent it out. "Marcus, this is our home." "It was," he said. "Now it's an asset." I turned around and looked at him and said, "Dad isn't even cold in the ground and you want to sell our home." And he told me not to be dramatic and reminded me again that it was his house now. The words themselves were almost ordinary. It was the complete absence of anything behind them that was so devastating. He wasn't even angry. He just didn't care. I came home from a job interview a few days later and my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I knocked. I knocked harder. Eventually, Marcus opened the door just a crack and told me renovations were starting the next morning, that it wasn't safe for me to be inside with all the work going on, that he'd packed my things and they were waiting for me in the garage. I asked him if he was seriously kicking me out of our childhood home. "I'm protecting my investment," he said, "and honestly, Vincent, it's time you stood on your own 2 feet. I told him what he was doing was illegal. He gave me this slow, twisted smile and said, "Watch me." Then he stepped back inside and closed the door in my face. I stood on that porch completely alone, the afternoon light hitting the pavement too bright and too ordinary, and I thought about where I was going to sleep that night. And that's when I remembered the envelope in my wallet. Dad said I'd know when to open it. If not right now, standing outside the house I grew up in with nowhere to go, then when? I sat down on the front steps and tore it open, one sheet of paper, his handwriting. "Vince, if you're reading this, I'm gone and Marcus has the house. Call Mr. Caldwell if Marcus takes advantage of you. He'll know what to do, trust him. Love, Dad." I read it 3 times. My chest felt like something had collapsed inside it. My eyes were burning. Dad had known. He had anticipated this, specifically this, Marcus doing something bad enough to write a letter about, and he had never said a word to me. That was so like him, though. He'd point you toward the door, but he'd never carry you through it. He wanted you to find your own courage. He just made sure there was something waiting on the other side. I called Mr. Caldwell right there on those steps. Mr. Caldwell had me come stay at his place that night while we figured everything out. He reached over, took a bite of his pepperoni pizza, and pointed at a stack of papers with a greasy napkin. "Your father came to me 6 months ago," he said. He knew Marcus had the business mind, but he also knew Marcus had a cold heart. He told me, "I want Marcus to own the asset, but I want Vincent to have the home." Before he passed, Dad had created something called a life estate agreement tied to a separate trust, completely separate from the will. Marcus legally owned the house, yes, but I had a documented, enforceable right of occupancy for as long as I chose to live there. Dad had built a legal safety net underneath me without ever telling me it existed. Marcus called me the next day, voice sharp. "You really ran to the lawyer." "I did," I said. He laughed, but there was nothing real in it. He said the house was in his name and a little legal threat wasn't going to change that. I told him it wasn't that simple. I told him Dad had made arrangements. I suggested he get himself a good lawyer because it seemed like he hadn't fully understood the notice that had already been served. The silence on his end of the phone stretched out long and heavy, and then he said, quieter than before, "Did you know about this?" "No," I said, "but Dad did." More silence, and then Marcus's voice came back cold and mean and he said, "You always find a way to be the victim so someone rescues you." Something hardened in me right then, something that had been soft and hopeful for way too long. I'd spent years trying to find the good in my brother. This was his answer. I hung up. He hired a lawyer within a week and it became a real case. There were hearings, depositions, arguments about the precise legal language in the trust documents. His attorney painted me as unstable and dependent, someone exploiting grief to cling to property that wasn't mine. There were sessions where I walked out of the courthouse shaking, or furious, or just quietly ashamed all over again. But Mr. Caldwell never wavered. He'd remind me every time that Dad had been meticulous, that the documents were solid, that they were simply trying to exhaust me into giving up. The final hearing was quieter than I expected. The judge reviewed the documents, and that's when Mr. Caldwell dropped the hammer. The house wasn't just left to Marcus. It was locked inside a highly specific trust. Marcus was only designated to inherit the property on the strict condition that he honored my legal right to live there. Dad had written a ruthless forfeiture clause into the paperwork. Because Marcus illegally locked me out and attempted to sell the asset, he violated the core condition of the trust. The judge ruled that Marcus had instantly forfeited his inheritance. Per Dad's backup instructions, full ownership of the house defaulted entirely to me. Marcus didn't look at me when it was over. He walked straight past me in the hallway like I was already gone from his life, which I suppose I was. The house didn't become mine because I deserved it more than him or because I played my cards better. It became mine because Marcus, the moment he was handed power, used it as a weapon. In trying to take absolutely everything, he ended up with nothing at all. I went back that afternoon and walked into the kitchen and picked up Dad's mug and washed it slowly and put it away. The house was quiet, the same kind of quiet it had been since he passed, but for the first time in weeks it didn't feel heavy or hollow. It just felt like home. I don't want to pretend this ended with Marcus and me having some big reconciliation, because it didn't and I don't know if it ever will. Some things crack in a way that doesn't really heal, and that's just the truth of it. But the thing I keep coming back to is that my dad knew his oldest son well enough to build a secret legal protection into his estate, quietly, without telling anyone, and then trusted me to find it when I needed it most. So I want to ask you this. Do you think my dad was right to keep all of that hidden from me until the last possible moment? Or should he have just told me what was in place so I wasn't blindsided? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear it. And if you want to hear more real-life stories like this every week, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.